Death Dealer Ray is back as we are rounding out the second rotation of the Hall of Trials bosses. This fight is somewhat similar to the previous one, but there's also a few things that make it really, really different. Not just from the previous time Death Dealer Ray is here, but there's a couple of things that have been the case for every single Hall of Trials rotation, except for this one, which is kind of interesting. I'm pretty gear gapped out of this one, just with the way your gear needs to be aligned for this fight. I'm not holding this. I don't expect to make top 10. I think it's kind of interesting that the best gear requirements keep on shifting, but let's get into the general gist of the fight, as this is the first time Ray is here, and of course I'll be going into it in more detail in the run itself. We can go over the role for each of these slots, the units that you can use in these slots, as well as the builds that I will be using. So first up, Warrior in the front row. This fight will be very clearly designed around Laia. When you enter the break phase, you get your S2 back, and also your S3 damage is proportional to the attack of the hero in the back row. And this is the same as last time, the S3 damage, rather, scaling based off the attack of the hero in the back row. One big change is that you don't get attack buff for free anymore. You got greater attack buff for free last time, you don't this time. So you do need to bring your own attack buff, or have somebody give it to them. And then the S2 reset is necessary because when you use a non-attack skill in the break phase, you give destruction to all allies except for the caster. Before we get into what destruction is actually, we might as well go over supremacy. This just, after an enemy uses a skill, basically when DDR uses S3, you get your S2 back, and also gives you an extra turn, which is needed so that you are not stuck tanking venoms and you just cleanse everything. It's basically, you basically turn the chenille. And then destruction is when you are attacking, you weaken Wall of Corpses. And I wouldn't really say that you weaken the effect so much as the effect is it greatly increases its defense. You instead kind of just deal more damage is what that effect does. The way it ends up working is in the break phase, Laia uses S2, hit once with each unit, hit once with Laia, hit once with each unit, and you're capped at 6. 6 is the cap. And then Laia uses S3, big boom, it's exactly 8 hits to finish the break phase. So you do need a little bit of speed tuning required for that. And we need 2 or more warrior heroes in order to meet the team requirement for this rotation as well. The trial for this fight, same as last time, AoE unit with silence, provoke, or redirected provoke. So let's get into the roles. First up is Laia. Laia is Laia. You should have Laia. I have SSS Laia now after going for Sweet Miracles. I can't even roll anymore unless I want 2 Laias. She's here, she is our cleanser, she's our DPS, she has a lot of things. You should just use Laia. If there's any replacements, I haven't tested them, don't know if I will, but some other warrior with an S2 non-attack skill, like maybe it's a Hawk, I don't know. And you would also need Chenille on your team, just to get rid of all the poisons and venoms, I'm pretty sure. But pretty much everybody should have Laia, so you should just use her anyways. And then there is Kawerik. He's going to be our AoE silence / provoke / redirected provoke. Same as last time, you've got Kawerik, you've got Euphine, you've got Fairy Tale Tenebria, and you've got Cecilia, with Kawerik and Euphine being the best ones, as they have attack percent imprints. Both of mine are no imprint, so it doesn't really matter who I use. Since I'm using Mascot Hazel as my healer, Kawerik ends up being better anyways. So now we've got Mascot Hazel as my healer, plus attack buffer. Cermia brings her own attack buff, but she can still give herself and Kawerik greater attack buff. You don't need too much sustain for this fight. Some other options for the healer slot, there's Amelia, there's Tamarin, yeah, Elusa was using Tamarin. And yeah, you don't need that much sustain. Look, if Amelia works without a sustain artifact, then you don't need a lot. So this is just the healer slot. If you are using a DPS without attack buff, then you really do want an attack buffer here. And then there is Cermia. Cermia is just amazing for this fight. Really high base attack, self greater attack buff, and since the boss actually has defense, her S3 pen actually does something. So we will be using Cermia as our DPS. Some other alternatives, same as last time, Sylvain Sage Vivian manages to stack her attack pretty high. And, I mean, Cermia's free, just use her. And then let's get into their stats. Let's take a look at Laia. So Laia, you just want to max out her HP as high as you can get on her HP, and you can tune the rest around her speed, rather. So this is just the speed I had after maxing out my HP. One of the interesting things is that damage percent artifacts are actually good, finally. So you do want her to have a damage boosting artifact. I tested with Sweet Miracle and also with an attack boosting artifact. This one just does the most damage. So you're going to want to use, ideally, Special Strawberry Cake, or what is the other one? Our Beautiful Seasons, I think, is the other one. Yeah, so ideally you want to use one of these, as they give the largest attack boost. If you have a plus 30 Pipette Lance, you can use that. Some other options is, I mean, she's a warrior, so she's got access to a lot, but you would just use Symbol, really, is the best alternative, probably. Jacko Symbol, I think it's too inconsistent to get a debuff on him. Actually, it's not that bad. You S1 twice with Hazel. It might depend on what units you have. Anyways, this is just Laia. Max out her HP, damage boosting artifact. Now we can take a look at Kawerik. So Kawerik, I've got him pretty much full damage with a little bit of speed. I've got him on Penset. Penset's actually used for once, as the boss actually has defense in the break phase, whereas normally it's 0 defense. For ZE, I'm using the attack boost before using S3. This actually ends up being very useful. And Card of Small Miracles, attack and defense to all allies. This is pretty much just full DPS Destro Pen with like low mid speed range. Next up is Mascot Hazel. Mascot Hazel I've got really fast on a DPS build because, well, for one, her healing actually doesn't scale off of her HP. You can see here it scales off the target's HP plus her attack. This scales off of the target's HP plus her attack. So yeah, she never needed HP in the first place. You only gave her HP so that she wouldn't die. But since all of the damage in this fight is either really minor AoEs, percent HP damage, or just S1s going into your DPS, you don't really care about your bulk. So you just build her full DPS, and I like having her pretty fast. It doesn't mess with your tuning that much, as you can stall turns using her S2 and S3 to not hit in the break phase if you need to. And I will be using Warhorn on her for the attack boost for all allies. Lastly, there is our DPS Cermia. Cermia, I've got her just full attack. That's it. And now for her EE. Well, typically we use S1 for PvE content. For here, we're going to want to explicitly not use the S1, because in the break phase, we have exactly 8 hits to work with. And if Cermia procs her S1, that's going to ruin the break phase. We'll only be able to hit 5 stacks instead of 6, and we'll do a lot less damage in the break phase. And this is, some of the Hall of Trials block extra attacks outright, this one doesn't, so you do need to be wary of that. With that in mind, between S2 and S3, whichever one you have with the most attack, ideally 14%, that's the one you want to use. Again, as long as you're not using the S1 one, it's fine. The S2 barrier, we don't actually get to really utilize, so using S3 is fine too, even though we never use its effect. For her artifact, so I'm using Border Coin. I think Border Coin is only good if you're plus 30. Because Cruel Mischief is 40%, and this fight has one thing that's pretty interesting about it, where it basically ends up where you do about the same damage in Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3. So I'd kind of just use Cruel Mischief, unless your Border Coin is plus 30. Because Border Coin, you only get 2 stacks in the first phase, so you'll be 30, 45, 45, whereas Cruel Mischief is 40, 40, 40, so they both sum up to 120. Your damage is slightly higher in the second and third phase though, so if you do have a plus 30 Border Coin, you can use it. The speed is debatably useful. You'd be able to work with your tunings regardless. My Border Coin is plus 30, so I'll be using it. And now we can take a look at the run.
모든 게 끝났을 때 무슨 광경이 날 기다릴까?
DDR presses S3, and Laia gets an extra turn immediately, and we can press S2. Now we've cleansed everything, and you just start off the fight by kind of just waiting for DDR to press S2. My Hazel S2 and my Kawerik S2 here aren't really necessary, it's just because I was already pressing them at the start, and by the time I realized they weren't necessary, I already tuned around them. You don't need that much HP. You can see you take a bit of your current HP as damage every single turn. And the ads do have a small AoE, it's only like 1000 damage or something. So you don't really have to worry about it killing you, but you do need a little bit of HP at least to not die. You can see here it's about 1000 damage on your units. Pretty much Hazel S3 is going to be able to sustain you in the main phase. We're going to use S3 on Kawerik here to give him greater attack buff. Cermia can supply herself with greater attack buff, so we don't really have to use it on her. Then you also really want to pay attention once you hit 65 on the counter at the top. So we stall with Hazel and also to remove the silence from Cermia so she can S2. And you want to check whether or not Cermia would cut Laia after Kawerik uses S3, because Laia's going to get an extra turn after DDR moves. We're going to S2 and get a border coin stack, and we're going to S1 to save S3 for the break phase itself. DDR presses S2, Laia gets an extra turn, and we're going to press S2 here, but since our Laia is faster than Cermia, Laia's going to cut ahead of Cermia, and our tuning is going to work out fine. We're going to S3 onto Hazel herself to give her greater attack buff as well. And since Kawerik on his S3 has attack buff for himself for 2 turns, that's going to extend the duration of the greater attack buff for him, and that'll give him both turns in his break phase with greater attack buff. We silence both of the ads, and now they will kill themselves. So we're going to instantly S2 with Laia to get destruction, and that's why really important to make sure that Cermia is not going to cut Laia. You'll see an example of what I mean by stalling in the second phase. One hit with Hazel, and you're just going to pretty much hit with everybody and try to save your larger attacks for the second hit. That's why I don't Kawerik S2 there. Hazel S1 because it's more important to get the stacks. We have to stall one turn with Hazel later, but we can save it for the last possible turn. This way Cermia and Kawerik will both be hitting into higher stack counts. Also very important, it's pretty easy to do, especially with Cermia, since she's always going to have S2 up, but you do need to make sure that you use a non-attack skill to give Laia target weakness. Hazel S3 also gives it there, so either Hazel or Cermia would have done it. And now we Laia S3 to end the break phase. Once again, Laia gets her extra turn. We press S2 and we cleanse everything. And this phase is going to go pretty much the same as the first phase. Just keep a little bit of an eye on your HP to make sure that you don't die. And if you are using border coin, we have 2 stacks right now. We need a third one at some point in this fight, which is pretty trivial because we only need it before Laia S3s, and Cermia is going to get to press S2 during the break phase. I have to S1 here just for the hits. We still do have to get our 8 hits in before the second phase starts. And because I know that Hazel's going to cut, so Cermia won't die, we're going to S3 into Kawerik again to give him greater attack buff. And we're coming up on that 65 mark. So here we got 65 and we need to check. So DDR has 60 CR to go. Cermia and Kawerik are both going to move up. Laia's going to get an extra turn when DDR moves. So by the time Laia takes her turn after Kawerik moves, Cermia is going to cut in between, which means that we're going to hit the ad instead. We're going to leave DDR at 65 as DDR can't have his gauge reduced during the pre-break phase little thing, unless the overload buff or unique effect rather, has been removed. So here you can see that in effect. We're going to S3 in order to silence the ads. Again, this also extends our greater attack buff. And it's going to go down 60, down to 5%, so there's one hit left. S3 Hazel to give her greater attack buff for her first 2 hits into break phase as well, also stalls 1 turn. And now we can give Cermia herself greater attack buff for the break phase in her first S3. And just like that, now it's set up so that Laia is the first person to move in the break phase. So we're going to do our hits as usual. A little bit nicer that Cermia is going a bit later this time compared to the first one. And here we S3, and you can see the target weakness is going to pop up on Laia, though Cermia would also activate it with her S2. Giving Laia attack buff doesn't really do too much, it's like a 100k damage boost, but it is still damage. So yep, Cermia would have been fine for the target weakness as well. The non-attack skill thing is a bit more relevant if you're not using Cermia as your DPS and using somebody else. Not having target weakness is like a few million damage lost per Laia S3. So it's definitely really important that you at least get that. And now phase 3 is literally the same as before. There's not really much more to say about it, so you can watch the rest if you want, and I'll see you guys at the end.
난 이런 거 못하는데. 빨리 해치워 봅시다.
그럼 가보실까?
공연 시작. 함께 해주실 거죠?
걱정할 것 없어.
무대의 무대예요. 힘내봐요, 우리.
죽고 싶다면 죽여주지.
누군가 도와주면 좋을 텐데.
어떤 멍청이가 나한테 싸움을 걸지? 다들 잘 간다고? 이 몸이 친히 행차해주지?
도와주실래요? 서둘러주세요. 열심히 할게요. 급하답니다. 절 봐주세요.
나한테 덤비다니.
그럼 가보실까? 난 실전에서 절대 하지 않는다고.
어쩌지? 난 이런 거 못하는데. 꿈만 같아.
날 위해서 싸워. 복수가 먼저 쳐주마.
누군가 도와주면 좋을 텐데.
어떤 멍청이가 나한테 싸움을 걸지? 진지하게 가볼까? 다들 물러나라고. 하기 싫다면 말이야. 모두 날려버려.
열심히 할게요.
보통 효과는 내가 보증하거든.
And that is it for this rotation. Auto team, I'll take a look when the actual unequip hits on Wednesday. If you ask me what was really interesting about this rotation, is one, obviously, yes, since the boss has defense in the break phase, pen set and pen effects work now, but the big thing is this: the destroyed wall of corpses increases damage suffered by the boss by 2000%. And I'm pretty sure this is the first time for the Hall of Trials bosses where instead of having us have boosted damage on our units, the boss instead takes more damage. And this has a few effects. First off, going from break phase to break phase, your damage does not increase that much. That is because when you go from break phase to break phase, typically what happens is the boss gets a stack of increased damage taken, and that stack gets largely diminished by this 2000% increased damage taken effect from the destroyed wall of corpses, as it just gets added together. And that also makes it interesting because without the massive damage boost that we typically get, that makes damage percent artifacts actually usable, which is why we had special strawberry cake on Laia, as it's just 100% boost from target weakness, plus 20 from the artifact, which ends up not diminishing the value of the artifact that much at all, compared to some other rotations where we had like a ridiculous 8000% damage boost or something. So that's pretty interesting because it definitely changed the way I had to gear some of the units for the fight, and it's the first time it's been like that, I'm pretty sure. Anyways, I will see you guys next time.